Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 17 of Uzumaki Naruto, Birth of the New Demon King. If you guys enjoy this what if, and want to see part 18 of it, comment down below, and let me know. The like goal for this video is 200 likes. So like this video, to let me know that you're interested in this series, and you want the next part. Check out my new videos of My Hero Academia what ifs in my second channel, and give it some love as well. Link is in the description. And go ahead, and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. It was an early morning in Konoha. The sun was just beginning to rise over the trees to the east. The sky was being painted in rays of orange and yellows, and the trees looked like they had been lit on fire. The light breeze was rustling through the waking village, making those same trees sway, and caused several leaves to fall from their branches. Bird songs rang out in a beautiful melody that could ease anyone who heard them. Uzumaki Naruto woke up as the sunlight streamed in through the window of the bedroom in his new house. Opening his eyes, Naruto smiled as the first thing he saw was the red hair of Kyuubi. Ever since he had gotten back from his mission, the two of them had spent every waking minute he had not been training, or spending time with his father in the village with each other. They didn't just have sex either, though a large majority of their time were spent in the throes of passion and pleasure of the flesh. They had been spending time together in a way that couples did, watching movies, cuddling by the fireplace. They had even gone on a few picnics, one of which was in the secluded part of Konoha's forest, though that particular date it ended with them making love. Not that Naruto would complain about being intimate with such a beautiful woman. Though Minato did have some choice words for Naruto's decision at not informing him of the specifics of his and Kyuubi's relationship, the fact that the older blonde had ranted on his Kage Bunshin notwithstanding. Needless to say, Minato had not been too pleased at first to know that Naruto was in an intimate relationship with the Kyuubi no Yuko, and it had actually been the cause of their first father-son argument. Naruto had made it perfectly clear to the man that he was an adult, not just because he was wearing a Konoha headband, but also because he had grown up faster than everyone else his age. He was not in need of mothering, or fathering as it were. Naruto was long since the past of actually needing a father. While Minato had not liked that, he had been forced to concede the point. Though he did make it perfectly clear that, while he wouldn't say anything, he did not approve of Naruto's relationship with Kyuubi. Which was fine with Naruto, truth be told. While he respected his dad, he didn't really care about the man's opinion on his love life. Shifting his body so that he was laying on his side, Naruto moved slightly out of Kyuubi's grasp, so he could be face to face with her. Her breathing was slow, letting Naruto know she was asleep, and her mouth was lightly parted in a cute yet serene expression. Finding the look irresistible, Naruto leaned in, and kissed her directly on the lips. She began to stir, and he kissed her again, and again until she woke up fully, and began kissing him back. "Good morning," Naruto said, grinning at her slightly glazed expression Kyuubi had once he pulled back. "Time to get up." "Right," Kyuubi said with a loud yawn. Getting out of bed, Kyuubi stretched her arms over her head, an act which pushed her breasts out further due to how firm they were. Naruto didn't bother with discreet looks as he took in the sight of her full and firm breasts, his gaze going to her light pink nipples near her jaw, which were looking a little hard. She and Naruto never bothered sleeping with their clothes on, since they had sex every night for the past week, since he had been back from his mission to return Tsunade to Konoha. Currently she was in her hybrid form, letting her 9 tails free, much to her relief. When she was done stretching, she turned her face towards him, and asked with a grin, "Are you going to help me get clean?" Giving the vixen a grin of his own, Naruto bounded out of bed, and strode over to her, scooping her up into his arms and moving towards the bathroom. Kyuubi giggled as she wrapped her arms around his neck, and kicked her feet lightly. "Shower or bath?" he asked as they entered the room. "Shower," Kyuubi said after a moment's thought. Having received his answer, Naruto stepped into the shower, and set Kyuubi on her feet. He turned the shower faucet, and sighed contentedly as he instantly felt the warm water hit his back. Thanks to the seals Minato had placed on the shower heads, no one had to worry about their water being cold, if they didn't want to. The seal was designed to activate with the faucet and channel fire nature chakra, to heat the water as it left the shower head. It was a rather ingenious piece of work, when Naruto hoped to one day be capable of accomplishing similar feats with his Fuinjutsu. The two of them took their time washing each other, sneaking kisses that ranged from small pecks to long, drawn-out kisses that were hot enough to leave them both gasping for breath and blinking stars from their eyes. Though that was not all they did, especially when Naruto began washing the parts of her body that were more sensitive than others. Kyuubi closed her eyes as Naruto's soapy hands caressed and fondled her breasts. She leaned her back against his chest, so he could have more reach, another reason also being so she could feel his member rub against the lips between her thighs, which were wet with a mixture of water and her own juices. As she felt Naruto pinch her nipples, she moaned again and asked, "Do you have any plans today?" "A few," Naruto said once he finished cleaning and playing with Kyuubi's breasts. His hands went down to her stomach and began rubbing and washing the skin there as he said, "I was thinking of spending time with some of the other jonin down at the Shinobi Bar and Grill." As the name suggested, the Shinobi Bar and Grill was a bar that catered specifically to ninja of Chunin level and higher. Genin could go there, but it was something of an unspoken law, not to say anything until they reached a certain age. "In that case, I think I'll go to the hot springs for a while," Kyuubi said, though her breath hitched at the end, as one of Naruto's hands slid in between her legs and began teasing the outer lips of her honeypot. "Take Hin and Teiwaya with you, okay?" he requested, smiling a bit when Kyuubi began humping his hand. "I know you still don't much care for humans, but not all of them are bad. It's just a matter of finding a gem among all the trash." "I know," Kyuubi gasped as she felt herself release fluids onto Naruto's hand. Sagging against the blonde's muscled chest, she sighed and said, "I am trying to get along with humans. At least I find speaking with Anko, Kurenai, and Hana to be enjoyable." Kyuubi had managed to build a small rampart with those three after Naruto introduced them. It was probably because the three weren't a bunch of unintelligent and hairless apes, as his red-haired mate would put it. The trio of Kunoichi were some of the few that actually took their job seriously and seemed capable of holding an intelligent conversation. Another person Kyuubi got along with was Senjutsu Tsunade. Naruto had been a little surprised when the two of them had hit, if off decently enough, considering his mate had been sealed inside of her grandmother. Though their companionship might have had something to do with their shared passion for alcohol. The only difference being the substances they drank, as Kyuubi enjoyed wine and Tsunade liked sake, but they seemed to enjoy debating the merits of which one of the drinks were better. It was an odd relationship, but one Naruto wasn't going to complain about, even if he still didn't respect Tsunade herself. "And you have no idea how pleased I am to hear that," Naruto said. His arms went around her waist and pulled her closer to him, relishing in the feel of her body in his arms. No matter how many times they had done this and act similar, the novelty of having someone he could be this intimate with hadn't worn off. "Though I do wish you would expand your sphere of friends." "And who would you suggest?" asked Kyuubi, before she gave a snort. "Yamanaka the gossip queenie, no? Haruno the banshee Sakura? Or about Uchiha the spoiled brat from the clan I hate most, Sasuke? The only members of your age group worth speaking to are Shikamaru, Shino, and Choji. And one of them thinks it's too troublesome talking to your girlfriend. Another doesn't talk at all, or speaks one-word sentences, and the last one spends more time eating than talking. I suppose I could talk to Lee, but those eyebrows he and his sensei are sporting creeps me out, and that should be impossible. Neji, despite speaking about fate all the time, is still an asshole. And while Tenten seems decent, we like different things." She paused before grimacing, "Plus the last time we met she tried to grab my sword." "Point taken," Naruto conceded with a chuckle, remembering that incident. It had been on their way back from the sparring match, where Kyuubi had been helping Naruto with his kenjutsu. They had run into Tenten on the way back, and the girl had fallen in love with Kyuubi's Nadachi. The bun-haired weapons expert had asked Kyuubi if she could see her sword. Of course his mate said no. Anyone who touched that particular blade beside Kyuubi would suffer a fate far worse than death. Not even Naruto could safely touch it. However, the redhead's answer had not sat well with the girl, and several times she had tried to steal Kyuubi's sword from her. It was getting to the point where the demoness was about ready to show the girl her sword by shoving it down her throat. Shaking the thoughts from his head, Naruto said, "Though you won't have to worry about Sasuke or Sakura. From what I hear, Sasuke is currently undergoing mental help with a psychologist, and Sakura isn't even a Kunoichi anymore." He had heard about their dishonorable suspension after returning to the village. Sasuke had even had his Sharingan sealed, a fact he was sure burned the Uchiha something fierce. "I'm spending some time with Kin as well," Kyuubi added. "She's okay, though I think she may have a crush on me." Naruto snickered a little at that, partly because it might be true. He had caught the dark-haired girl staring at Kyuubi's breasts and ass several times in the last few days. "Though I don't really like Teiwaya. Her swearing problem, I know," Naruto said. He knew Teiwaya's habit to swear and call people by derogatory nicknames pissed Kyuubi off. Naruto found it more amusing than anything, but he knew that Kyuubi would not be satisfied until Teiwaya could stop cursing every other sentence. Unfortunately, the girl's mouth problem seemed to be more of a habit than anything else. "That little issue will take a while for her to fix though. Doesn't make it any less annoying," Kyuubi muttered. Naruto kissed her on the back of the neck to soothe her agitation. They finished washing each other, and Naruto turned off the shower. The pair got dressed, and after giving Kyuubi another long kiss as goodbye left to go and spend some time with his peers. Birth of the New Demon King. Minato was just finishing up his paperwork when a soft chime alerted him to his secretary calling. Pressing a button on the communicator, he asked, "What is it?" "I have some members of the council who want to call a meeting." Frowning, Minato asked, "Who?" When he received the list of names, all members of the civilian council, his frown deepened. But Danzo no longer on the council, and busy playing with his newfound restrictive freedom, a paradoxical position, if there ever was one, and the two elders replaced, the civilian council had lost much of its power. However, they did still have some, and one of the things they could do was call a council meeting if a majority of its members agreed to. And unfortunately for him, over half of the civilian council had just been named. Very well, Minato said after several seconds. Get someone to inform the clan heads and tell the civilian council that the meeting will be in 1 hour. Of course, Hokage-sama. Minato turned off the communicator and frowned, his mind trying to deduce what the civilian council might want. There were many possibilities, and none of them very pleasant. Birth of the new Demon King. Tsunade sighed as she relaxed into the hot water of the hot spring. It had been a week since she had come back to Konoha, and in that time period many things had happened. Their first surprise had been seeing that Sarutobi was not the one in charge. When she had first entered the Hokage's office, and saw none other than Namikaze Minato sitting in the desk, working on paperwork, as though he had never died, she had thought someone was playing some kind of prank on her. Or that she was trapped in a genjutsu. In fact, it had taken nearly 15 minutes to calm her and Shizune down, just enough to explain how he was alive again. Of course, learning that your old teammate had been stupid enough to summon someone who was claimed by the Shinigami was a bit of a shocker. Though it explained how Minato had come back. The specifics of the Ito Tensei were not known to many, and it was unlikely that Orochimaru had been able to do more than glance at the jutsu and learn how it was done. It was doubtful he even cared about certain aspects and limitations it might have. The man had never been one for caring about a jutsu's intricacies, merely about learning it. It was half the reason he was so into experimentation. He was always trying to come up with a shortcut to learning jutsu. After the initial shock of seeing someone who was dead, alive, Minato had given her the job he wanted her to do. The first was a complete overhaul of the hospital. Tsunade had been assigned as the chief medical ninja there, with Shizune as her second in command. The practices of the hospital had apparently gotten lazy, since she had left and needed a sound kick in the rear to get back into shape. While she still had some reservations, fixing up the hospital was something she could take pleasure in, if for no other reason than she could show the rookies how everything was really done. Her second job once she finished fixing the hospital's medical practices was to begin launching her medical ninja program. During the Second War, after her little brother was killed, she had come to Sarutobi with this proposal, but it had been deemed too costly to start in the middle of the war. Tsunade could partially understand that since war cost a lot of money, and they had already been straining their coffers at the time. It had still angered her, especially because it was in many ways the reason her lover Dan had died. Now that she was being allowed to create the program she had wanted to for so long, she couldn't deny feeling a certain amount of pleasure. While she may have left Konoha, because of the pain being their cause, she had never forgotten her oath as a medical ninja, and being able to create a program that would help save lives was always something she had been hoping to do. Her first plan was to look up information on all of the promising genin and chunin of the village, to see who had the best capabilities for becoming a medical ninja. She wanted those squads that were already in the field to have medics who could heal them when injured. After that, she would look at those students in their last 2 years at the academy. It was her hope that, if she could start training people early, they would have more skilled medics ready to start off as genin. That would mean by the time they reached chunin, the medics would have enough experience to begin working on major operations at the hospital. The problem was figuring out who was best suited for being a medical ninja. To be a medic, one had to have near-perfect chakra control, even better control than a genjutsu specialist. They also had to be fast and skilled at dodging. A medic was never a frontline soldier, they were healers, and as such needed to avoid taking damage, so they could heal the members of their squad. The other problem was figuring out the best way to train them. Tsunade doubted she would have more than maybe 15 students at any given time, but that still was too many people to give her personal attention to training. And the only person she felt was qualified to teach beside her was Shizune. Her attention was taken from her thoughts as the door to the changing room slid open. Looking up, she saw Kit, Kin, and Teiwaya walk in. She knew Kin and Teiwaya, of course. Sarutobi had convinced Minato to trust her with the knowledge that they were missing ninja from Odo who defected after Orochimaru died. Both were proclaimed Kia in the Konoha database, and the two of them wore a basic disguise to hide themselves among Konoha's population until they were ready to do whatever it was Minato planned on having them do. Kit was something of a mystery. She got along with the woman decently enough, both being lovers of alcohol, but she knew very little about her otherwise. The red-haired beauty tended to keep her past to herself, and rarely interacted with anyone other than Naruto. The only thing Tsunade knew was that she was Naruto's lover, and that for some reason Minato didn't really like her. It was an odd thing considering the woman's personality reminded her of an odd mixture of her grandmother Mido and Kushina. She had all the regal poise her grandmother had, yet at the same time she held a fiery temper that matched Kushina's. Either way, they were welcome company as Shizune was still working at the hospital. "Hello, Kit-san, Kin, Teiwaya," Tsunade said. She held up a body of sake and looked at Kid with a raised eyebrow. She got a head shake no and shrugged, having already guessed that would be the answer. For some unfathomable reason Kid preferred wine to sake, though Tsunade would understand why. Tsunade-san, Kit said, giving her that regal nod she would expect from her grandmother. The redhead moved deeper into the water, and sat down next to Tsunade. Kin and Teiwaya offered their own greetings as they two sat close by. "Ha, this feels nice," Kin said, sighing as she sank into the water. "Fuck yeah it does," Teiwaya agreed. "Teiwaya, am I going to have a bar of soap down your throat again?" asked Kid in a sing-song voice that sent shivers of fear up the former redhead and current blonde's back. "No?" stuttered Teiwaya, paling. She had already had 42 bars of soap shoved down her mouth this past week alone. Her mouth was so clean it squeaked when she talked. She didn't need it to be any cleaner. Tsunade had to admit that, being impressed with the way Kid made a hard-ass kunoichi like Teiwaya fear her merely by talking. "So how are you in Naruto?" she asked. Kid gave her a slightly lecherous grin. Having such a powerful and energetic lover is rather nice. Especially since he knows how to please a woman. With his unlimited stamina, he usually puts me to sleep via exhaustion from amazing and passionate sex. Kin and Teiwaya both blushed beet red, while Tsunade grunted. "I meant how are you two getting along, pervert? You're almost as bad as my teammate, Jiraiya." "Oh, well then you should have been more specific," Kid replied with a bright smile. Tsunade's eyes gained a slight twitch, already knowing the redhead was doing that to bother her. "And I am nothing like that, Lecher." She paused before continuing. "We're doing well, even though we've been together for nearly 2 months now. We're still learning something new about each other every day. I look forward to spending the rest of my life with him." "Aren't you taking things a little fast?" asked Tsunade. "If you've only known him for 2 months then, how do you know he's the one?" "Oh, he is," Kid replied with a mysterious smile. "I know that for a fact. There can be no other." Her smile turned decidedly teasing as she added, "Besides, he spoiled me for other men. I don't think I would be able to sleep with another guy without telling them how inadequate their performance is compared to Naruto-sama's." Tsunade grunted slightly, both at her statements and her title for Naruto. She still didn't know why Kid called him so respectfully. It wasn't like the brat was anything special, just another young upstart with a chip on his shoulder and a big name to live up to. Though even Tsunade had to acknowledge and respect the blonde's strength. Silence soon permeated the hot spring as everyone was left to their own thoughts. Tsunade's went to Naruto. There was just something about the blonde that made her slightly uneasy. It wasn't the kind she got when her ninja sense told her someone was dangerous, though she knew he was. It was more like he was hiding something from everyone, like the Naruto who presented himself to everyone, was only one facet of the real Naruto. She couldn't really think of any way to describe her thoughts on her fellow blonde other than that. A burst of chakra had both Tsunade and Kid looking to the left, as a swirl of leaves appeared on top of the rocks. A female Anbu member with a cat mask and purple hair appeared in a bowed position before them. "I apologize for interrupting your relaxation, Tsunade-sama. However, the council has requested a meeting, and all clan heads are to attend." The groan escaped Tsunade's lips at hearing the council wanted to hold a meeting. One of the unfortunate aspects of her returning was that Minato had forced the position of Senju clan head on her. Despite the fact that she was the last Senju, as the rest of her clan had been killed in the First and Second Ninja Wars, the Senju names still held a lot of weight within the village. They also had a hereditary seat on the council, thanks to the Senju being one of the founding clans of Konoha. "How much time do I have before the meeting starts?" asked Tsunade. "Half an hour." "Right, I'll be there." The Anbu nodded, and disappeared the same way she appeared, within a swirl of leaves. "That must suck, having to be called away from your personal time, because a bunch of cocksuckers with overinflated egos feel the need to bitch at you," Kid commented. "Ugh, don't even talk about them right now," Tsunade grumbled as she leaned back and closed her eyes. "Aren't you going to head to the meeting?" "No," Tsunade grunted, "I'll go after I finish my sake." Kid snickered a little, but Tsunade just ignored her in favor of drinking her alcohol. Birth of the New Demon King. Unko, Kurenai and Hana were all sitting around in a booth at the Shinobi Bar and Grill, as was the usual with them. Many of the men stared but none approached. It had been a long time since any male actually had the guts to try and hit on them, especially when they were together. Between Kurenai's hatred of all things perverted, Anko's lust for blood and violence, and Hana's feral demeanor towards anyone stupid enough to come near them, when smelling like a walking pheromone, more than 90% of the male population were too afraid to come within a 10-meter radius of them. "Hey waiter. Can we get some more dango and red bean soup over here?" Anko shouted to one of the waiters that was passing somewhat near them, though he was still far enough away to avoid their wrath should he be caught peeking on them. The waiter nodded and scurried off to get their order. Grinning happily, Anko said, "I love the power that comes from fear." Hana rolled her eyes. "Of course you do, Anko. With all of the random acts of violence you commit upon the general populace, that doesn't surprise me." "Speaking of violence, did I tell you about the sucker I got to interrogate a while ago?" said Anko. She pulled out a small slip of paper with a seal on it, a silencing seal, and stuck it to the underside of the table. Leaning in to speak, she said, "You know how Naruto-kun was attacked by those Iwa ninja?" "Yes, Anko, I was there after all," Hana said. She had not been there at the time of the attack, but she was on the mission and saw its aftermath. She was also the one who informed Anko about the attempted assassination. Outside of those who went on the mission, only Anko and Kurenai actually knew about it. The Yondaime had been trying to keep the assassination quiet and broker some kind of deal to settle the attack on his son. It was a smart decision, as people would be calling for Iwa's blood if it actually got out that there was an assassination attempt on the honorable son of the Yondaime. An odd turnaround, considering many of the people in Konoha would have cheered if Naruto were to die a few weeks ago. Yeah, Anko said, waving off her words. Anyways, a missing ninja was recently caught by our border patrol entering our territory. With the invasion and all, we've been stepping things up, so I guess it's understandable that he was caught so quickly. However, what's interesting is he was coming from the direction of Earth Country. Do you think I would hire a missing ninja to scout our defenses? Asked Hana. Hokage-sama thinks it's a possibility, Anko said with a shrug. Personally, I think it's very likely. They know that can't be caught doing anything they shouldn't right now, especially as they're trying to broker a deal with Yondaime-sama to escape his wrath for their attempt on his son. At the same time, I'm sure I was trying to find a weak point in our defenses, so they can gain the upper hand in any bargaining that's to take place. Konoha and Iwa had been at odds ever since the Third Great Shinobi War, in which Minato had destroyed most of their forces in a single battle. The hatred Iwa gained from the loss of so many of their shinobi in Kunoichi meant they were always looking for a way to plant spies within Konoha in order to find some weakness they could exploit. It was a never-ending battle of stealth reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance between the two great nations. They were stupid to even attempt killing Naruto-san in the first place, Hana said. I wasn't at the battle in Tenzakugai, but I heard from Shizune that he killed 4 of them and captured the 5th without getting so much as a scratch. And I saw him when he and his 2 sen began fighting right after he finished killing off Orochimaru, Anko said. And that was after winning the entire Chunin exam. The kid's a fucking monster on the battlefield. I pity anyone who ends up getting orders to kill him. Hana nodded in agreement. Yeah, me too. So did you get any information from that missing ninja? No, Anko leaned back and pouted. He has some kind of seal on his tongue that prevents him from talking about certain things. Hokage-sama is looking into it, but he said it could take a few days before he cracked the sealing code used. Deciding to change the subject, she looked over at Kurenai and said, "You've been silent ever since we got here, Night-chan. Is something wrong?" Kurenai sighed and sagged a little in her seat. "Asuma and I are on the outs again." "Uh-oh, having another lover's quarrel," Anko said. "You and Asuma have been arguing a lot more recently, haven't you? This is the 5th time in 1 month that you've come in like this, though it's thankfully not as bad as the first time you and Asuma had a fight." Kurenai blushed a little at that. It had been when they first started dating in secret. Asuma had made a comment on women that she had found derogatory, and she had gone off on him. She didn't remember what she had said exactly, but knew it was insulting. Not one to take things from anyone, even his own father, Asuma had retaliating with some pretty terrible remarks about her frigid bitch personality. Later that night, Kurenai had dragged Anko out and proceeded to get completely wasted, all the while crying about how it was over for her and Asuma. That was a completely different circumstance, Kurenai defended. "Sure, I know that," Anko said, holding her hands up in defense. The food and sake came a moment later, and they paused in their conversation until the waiter had run off. "All I'm saying is that maybe you and Asuma just aren't meant for each other. Maybe." However, acknowledging that she and Asuma might not make a good couple just seemed to depress her even more. Anko and Hana tried to cheer her up, an endeavor that was not proving very successful. During their attempt, Anko looked up and into the crowd before a grin broke out on her face at seeing familiar long and spiky locks. "Naruto-kun," Anko shouted, catching the attention of her 2 female companions as she waved at the blonde. Naruto seemed to have noticed her as well, not that hard considering she was shouting his name and waving like a loon. He smiled before making his way over to the trio, much to the disgruntled muttering of the men who wondered how he had managed to get in with 3 of the top 10 most desirable kunoichi in the village. "Anko-chan, Hana-san, Kurenai-san," Naruto greeted as he sat down next to Anko. "How are my 3 favorite kunoichi?" "Good," Anko said with cheer as she began digging into some dango again. As she grabbed another stick, she held it out to Naruto. "Want some?" "Sure, thank you," he said as he took the stick from her hand and began eating the dango slowly. The other 2 looked at each other knowingly before Naruto spoke again. "You alright, Kurenai-san?" he asked. "You look a little down." "Is it that obvious?" asked Kurenai, seeming to wince at being so easily read. "For those who are actually observative of their surroundings, yes," Naruto responded. "And no, it's not obvious. You're actually disguising your emotions fairly well. But I lived in the red light district for 13 years, and you don't survive a place like that without being able to observe your surroundings carefully. Especially when you were a known Jinchuriki." He had to be especially careful, because if he even ran into a single drunk, it would end in either him being beaten until that drunk was finished or passed out, or it would escalate to a small group beating that ended in the same way. Kurenai frowned at the mention of where he lived, but accepted the slightly unusual compliment to her skills at keeping her emotions hidden. If you don't mind me asking, may I know what is you so down? Before Kurenai could respond, Anko said, she and her boyfriend are fighting, again. Kurenai glared at Anko, but Naruto surprised them both when he said, you mean Asume, right? When the three kunoichi looked at him in shock, he chuckled and asked, what? You don't think it was that well kept of a secret, do you? Asume's female student is Yamanaka Ino, the gossip queen extraordinaire. With her on his team, it was impossible for that information not to get out eventually. The three had to concede his point. Ino was a well-known gossip, and had the loosest lips any of them had ever seen. Not a good thing for a kunoichi. Kurenai sighed as she began to explain her problem, thinking that maybe a male perspective could give her some advice. Asuma was talking about taking our relationship to the next level, she began. I told him I wasn't ready, and he got mad at me. Uh-oh, Anko muttered as Kurenai actually began making sniffing noises. That either the argument between her and Asuma was really bad, or she was just drunk. Kurenai was a maudlin drunk, so she would often become depressed after drinking too much. It was possibly a mixture of both, as she hadn't had enough sake to get anything more than a light buzz. As Anko and Hana began rubbing Kurenai's back, Naruto said, so basically he wants you to put out, but you don't feel ready to commit. Kurenai looked at him strangely, likely from his choice of words, but nodded nonetheless. And I'm guessing you don't want to take that last step until you're sure he's the one, right? This time her eyes actually widened as she nodded, surprised that he had already guessed her reasoning. And Asuma probably didn't like that, being a hot-blooded male who cares more about sex than he does having a real relationship. I don't know about that, Kurenai said in Asuma's defense. He's usually really sweet most of the time. And yet he wants you to sleep with him before you're ready, Naruto pointed out. Even with all of the teasing he had given to Kyuubi during their training, he would never have forced her to have sex with him, unless she was ready. In his eyes, it was dishonorable to force or con a girl into sleeping with you when she didn't want to. It was too close to rape in his opinion. Kurenai sniffed a bit as she conceded the point. True, she whispered. At this point Anko decided that Kurenai had enough to drink and replaced her sake with a glass of water, along with forcing her to eat something filling to help settle the alcohol currently in her. Do you want my advice? Asked Naruto. Kurenai turned to look at him and he continued, I wouldn't give it to you, unless you want it, but if you want to hear what I think you should do, it could prove useful. Since I am coming at this from a male perspective and all. Kurenai seemed to think about it as her eyes glazed over slightly. They cleared a second later and she nodded. I think you should tell him to fuck himself, Naruto said. The reactions he got were amusing. Hana shoved a fist in her mouth to keep from laughing. Anko didn't bother to do even that as she snickered. However, Kurenai was wide-eyed and gaping at him. Trying not to laugh at their reactions, Naruto continued saying, or you could tell him that, if he wanted a quick lay he should just go to a brothel. If you're not ready to take the next step, then you shouldn't, and if he can't respect your decision, and be willing to wait until you are, then he's not worth your time. Or your sadness. Kurenai blinked at him several times, long enough that a still snickering Anko shut the raven-haired beauty's gaping jaw. After a few seconds Kurenai said, you know what, you're right. And just like that she seemed to gain a renewed fire in her eyes. If he can't be willing to wait for me, then he doesn't deserve to be with me. Thank you, Naruto-san. No need to thank me. I did this for my own peace of mind. You see, I have a hard time seeing such a beautiful woman sad, he said with an exaggerated wink, letting them know he was at least somewhat joking. It's in my nature to help them, or so Kid says. That was the false name he had made for Kyuubi. He didn't want people to know that the demon who had nearly destroyed their village was not only out of the seal, but walking amongst them. Thanks to his father, they had even forged legal documents making her a citizen of Konoha, so no one would know otherwise. Anko giggled a little, which would creep out most men as it usually meant she was on the verge of violence. Kurenai cracked a rare smile, and Hana just snickered a little. Even so, I appreciate the advice, Kurenai said, standing up. Now if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go find Asuma and give him a piece of my mind. As she walked out of the bar, Hana stood as well. And I'd better follow her just in case she gets in trouble. Hana waved goodbye to the two still sitting, and left as well. It looks like we're alone, Anko said with a hum of thought. Relatively speaking anyways, Naruto added as they were still in a bar with several dozen, if not 100 people. So what do you want to do now? Wanna go and help me destroy a training field? Anko grinned at the blonde. Are you asking me to help you cause mass amounts of damage and destruction? Yes. My Naruto-kun, you really know how to treat a girl. I do try, Naruto replied as the two of them stood up and paid for the food, before heading off to destroy a training field. Birth of the new Demon King. Minato entered the council chambers with a frown on his face. Most of the members were already sitting in their seats. The only person missing besides himself was Tsunade, and he had expected that. Sitting in their spots as his advisors were Jiraiya and Sarutobi, with Hiashi sitting in his clan seat to fill the role of clan head. He was pleased to see his former sensei taking his job seriously. Minato was sure this had something to do with Naruto's threat of castration. If he spent any time peeking into hot springs that he could have spent helping the village. But so long as Jiraiya was working, Minato didn't care. Taking his seat, Minato said, "It seems we're one short." However, just as he said, that Tsunade burst into the room. "You're a tad late, Tsunade Hime," the Yondaime said, using her princess title since that was more or less what she was to the village. "Yeah, well, your Anbu caught me while I was in the hot springs," Tsunade grumbled as she moved to the Senju seat. "What?" Jiraiya shouted in shock, before tears started falling from his eyes. "You mean to tell me you were in the hot springs, and I wasn't there?" "Jiraiya, I'm warning you," Tsunade said in a dangerous voice as she shook her fist in front of her face. Jiraiya paled at the implied threat, obviously remembering the last time he had peeked on her. If Minato remembered correctly, his sensei had nearly been killed, with 3 broken ribs, a punctured left lung, a broken arm, and shattered leg and a severe concussion. "You can threaten Jiraiya sensei after the meeting, Tsunade Hime," Minato said. Tsunade grumbled a little more, and only Tsume seemed capable of making out what was said as the woman snickered lightly. Minato couldn't hear it, but given Jiraiya's comments it was likely something about him, and perverts and no doubt, how they should all meet their violent end. Coughing into his hand, Minato turned to the civilian council and asked, "Now that we are all here, why don't get started? I believe there was a valid reason you called us all away from our duties." He let a slight edge seep into his tone, a reminder, and a warning of what would happen, should their reasons for calling a council meeting prove pointless. Only a few really seemed to understand the nature to his tone, and those were the ones who paled. The rest seemed oblivious to the subtle threat. Ahem, coughed the pink-haired councilwoman. Minato had learned that her name was Haruno Keiko. She was the mother of Naruto's former teammate Haruno Sakura, who had been given a discharge from his ninja forces for being unfit for duty. Keiko had also not been a member of the council until her husband, who had been the previous council member, died from a mysterious illness 5 years ago. Not much was known about the woman, but Minato had been able to find out that she held very radical beliefs in how things should be run. She was an extremist in every sense of the word. "We of the civilian council first wanted to apologize to you, Yondaime-sama, for the mistreatment of your Sachi." Minato had to admit that, when the woman wanted, she could sound very sincere. It was only his experience in reading people through their eyes that he could tell the woman didn't mean what she said. "We hope that you will forgive us for our ignorance and fallibility." Minato took a moment before responding, letting the silence drag out as he bore a hole through Keiko's head. This had the effect of making her, and consequently those on the civilian council, very nervous. Had it not broken character, he would have smiled. While he may hate politics with a passion, he knew how to play the game as well as anyone else. Finally, after nearly a full 2 minutes, Minato spoke. "I cannot accept your apology, because I am not the one you should be apologizing to. If you are really sincere about your desire to repent, then you should offer up a formal apology to my Sachi, Naruto. He is the one you wronged after all. All you did to me was disregard my dying wish." He took a slightly perverse pleasure in the increased nervousness and fear he felt from the civilians. While Minato did not believe in killing for revenge, there were many other ways to hurt people that didn't involve violence. He already had a few plans in the works that he was working on. He hoped to accomplish them by the end of the year, and if he did, all of the current civilian council members would be left on the streets and penniless. Sometimes, hurting someone's pocketbook and village standing hurt far more than physical pain. "We will of course offer Naruto-sama a formal apology at a later date," Keiko stammered. She quickly coughed into her hand, and tried to get back on track. "Now, to the point we brought you all here. As Naruto-sama has managed to manifest the Rinnegan, we believe it would only be proper if he were to start a clan here in Konoha." So that was their game. They wanted Naruto start a clan, and since he was the only member left of the Uzumaki clan, and the only one who had fully activated his demonic heritage, that essentially meant he was the one who would have to build up the clan's numbers. "So you want to recreate the Uzumaki clan in Konoha," Minato said. "And since he is the first and only member of the Uzumaki clan that still lives, not counting Tsunade Hime thanks to her grandmother, he will be under the Clan Restoration Act." The Clan Restoration Act, or CRA, was created in order to help Kekkei Jinkei that were on the verge of becoming extinct by allowing an heir to marry multiple women. There was no true limit to the number of women a male could marry, though there was a minimum requirement of 4. In order to keep the clan from going extinct, the last member of the clan had to impregnate those women by the time of his 18th birthday. If the last member of the clan was a female, then she would have to marry and bear a child by her 18th birthday, and if that child was male, they would then be subject to the CRA. It was an old law, one that had only been enacted once, when the Inizuka clan had almost gone extinct during the First Shinobi War. And Minato knew that Uchiha Sasuke would likely be subject to the law, though Minato was thinking of simply using the boy's seed to impregnate women as the boy was mentally unstable. If he allowed it, Naruto would also be subject to that law, but "I don't think so," Minato said, shocking those present. Before anyone could complain, he continued. "The Uzumaki clan is a clan of Yuzashiagakur no Sato, and while Yuzu may have been destroyed, our alliance with them was never discharged. Any Uzumaki who becomes a shinobi of Konoha is not subject to our laws. That is why Kushina-chan wasn't placed under the CRA when she married me. Naruto has every right to refuse being placed under it, and there is nothing anyone can do about that. Minato had to admit the council had come up with a clever plan, and one he suspected did not actually come from them. He would bet his Hokage hat that one of the elders, or possibly Danzum, had come up with the idea and used their influence to make the civilian council do their bidding. He knew they were the ones that usually came up with ploys like this during his tenure as Hokage, the first time they had attempted something similar with a boy who hailed from Kiri, who had a unique jutsu they thought was a bloodline. It hadn't been, but that had not stopped them from trying to get the jutsu in their grasp. But the Rinnegan, Keiko stuttered, trying to explain to the Hokage why it was so important for Naruto to bear as many children as possible. It's nearly impossible for anyone to gain, Minato said. At one point in time there had been over 1 million Uzumaki clan members, and yet none of them had the Rinnegan. From what Naruto told me, and what we know based on the fact that no other Uzumaki member gained the Rinnegan, we can assume that it's nearly impossible to activate. Even if Naruto restarted the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, there is a very good chance that none of his children will have the Rinnegan. Now, if that's all you wanted to talk about, then this meeting is hereby over. Birth of the New Demon King. The scene at the training ground Naruto and Anko had decided to go to for their own use was a picture of mass destruction. The ground was littered with pockmarks and craters, trees had been felled, and several were even burned down to nothing but stumps. There were several patches where the ground had been burned by a Kaiten jutsu, a few large puddles of water from a Suiton jutsu, and large mounds of upturned earth from Doton jutsu. In the center of this destruction were Naruto and Anko. The two of them had been sparring for around an hour, give or take a few minutes. Naruto had to admit that, while Anko wasn't as powerful as her sensei, and she was nowhere near as fun to battle as Itachi, Kasame, Kakazu and Hidan had been, she was still enjoyable to spar with. She just had this way of fighting that he couldn't help but admire. The woman was almost as unpredictable as him, though her unpredictability was more of an attribute due to random spurts of violence than any instinctive battle genius. Naruto was at the moment dodging punch after punch that Anko sent his way. She was very proficient at her late sensei's Hebiken fighting style, her movements both fluid and unpredictable, making it hard for most people to combat her. Which is why it was a good thing Naruto was not most people. He dodged and wove between the woman's attacks, using his superior speed and reflexes to keep several steps ahead of her. While she was decently fast, her speed was nothing compared to his, and her body simply did not have the ability to reach his level of physical prowess. As one of her fists came in again, Naruto grabbed it and tossed Anko over his shoulder. Anko managed to flip herself in mid-air and land on her feet, though she was sent skidding across the ground due to the speed with which she was tossed. Looking up, she was just in time to see Naruto come at her again. He came in with several punches, alternating between simple jabs and hooks. They were easy enough to fend off, but then he surprised Anko by dropping to the ground and attempting to sweep her off of her feet. Anko managed to jump over his foot just in time. She landed on her feet a little distance away and eyed the blonde with a smirk. "Heh, you don't think such a juvenile attack could catch me, do you?" she asked. "Not really," Naruto replied with a shrug. "But this next move will." In a burst of pure speed, Naruto rocketed over to Anko, who barely had any time to get his assault up as he began assaulting her fists and feet. It wasn't long before several of Naruto's punches began getting through, one particular punch knocking the wind right out of Anko and sending her to the ground. She landed on her back, and before she could even think about getting back up, Naruto was crouched next to her with a kunai at her neck. Anko huffed. "I hate you," she mumbled. "Aw, don't be like that, Anko-chan," Naruto said as he helped her stand up. "We both know, if you hated me, you would have castrated me a month ago." HMPH. Naruto chuckled as Anko turned her head and pouted. Looking up at the sky, he saw that the sun was beginning to set. He looked back at Anko and said, "It's getting pretty late. Do you want to go and get some Ichiraku with me?" "Can't," Anko said. "I've got a shift at INT. We're still trying to get that missing ninja border patrol caught to crack." "Ah, well, good luck with that," Naruto said. He thought about asking Kyuubi if she wanted to get some ramen with him, but he knew she was likely still at the hot springs. If there was one thing she loved as much as wine, it was a nice long soaked at the hot springs. He probably wouldn't see her until she came in after the hot spring closed. "Right, so will you later?" Anko asked, suddenly acting uncharacteristically shy, at least if you didn't know her. Naruto had spent enough time with Anko to know that she was a lot less sure of herself than she made herself out to be in public. "Of course," Naruto said with a grin. "I was actually thinking of seeing that new Princess Gale movie with Kid next week. If you wanted to do something similar sometime." Anko frowned at the mention of Kid, but it was gone before Naruto could place it. She smiled a moment later and said, "I may take you up on that." She looked around for a moment, as if expecting someone to be spying on them. When she had determined no one was around, Anko leaned over and kissed Naruto on the cheek. "I'll see you later, Naruto-kun," she said quickly, turning around and rushing off before the blonde could see her blush. Naruto touched a hand to his cheek, before chuckling and walking towards Ichiraku's. When he got there he was just about to yell out to Am and Tucci to get him the Uzumaki Deluxe Special, a ramen dish made specifically for Naruto's monster stomach. He closed his mouth however, when he saw that Ichiraku seemed to have a new employer. Said employee was a woman with straight blonde hair framing her face with a shorter cut in the back, and the front bangs reaching her shoulders and blue eyes. She was wearing the outfit that Am usually wore, a white robe with folds at the arm, and a dark blue apron with a ribbon that tied at the top. However, the thing that Naruto noticed the most was her breasts, which were easily on the size of DD cup and nearly a 2-3 RDS larger the Kyuubis. The apron she was wearing did very little to hide those, and Naruto couldn't help but wonder how they fit on such a slender figure. Not that he was stupid enough to get caught looking at her chest. Naruto kept his eyes on hers the entire time. "Hello," the woman greeted with a smile. "What can I get you?" The Uzumaki Deluxe Special please," Naruto said, getting back on track as he sat at his usual seat. "Coming right up," the mysterious and attractive blonde woman said as she went to make his order. As Naruto watched the woman work he decided to try and make some conversation in an attempt to get to know her. "You know, I don't think I've seen you around Konoha. Are you new here?" "Yes," the woman said as she started to stir-fry the noodles. "I just got here a few days ago." "So where did you move from?" asked Naruto. "A village to the north of here," she said. "It's a small village called Senzuka. I doubt you've heard of it." "No, I can't say that I have," Naruto said as his ramen was brought to him. He had to admit the ramen smelled good. If it tasted as good as it smelled he would be in heaven. However, now the moment of truth was upon him. He snapped his chopsticks and twirled some ramen on them. Placing the ramen in his mouth, Naruto's face held a look of contemplation as he chewed the noodle dish. "This is good," he said after a few moments. "You have a talent as a chef." "Thank you," the woman replied with a light blush on her face as she looked away. She looked back at Naruto who had gone back to eating quietly and slowly. Kyuubi had instilled manners in him at one point, letting him know how disgusting it was to see him inhale his food like a man dying of starvation. He has since gotten much better with his table manners. "So are you a shinobi?" "Huh?" Naruto looked up at the question before nodding and giving a grin. "Yep, I'm actually a newly promoted Takabetsu Jonin." "Is that like a special kind of ninja?" asked the woman, seeming interested in what he had to say. "Sort of," Naruto said. He stopped talking for a moment to polish the bowl off. Jonin are the elite ninja of the village, and Takabetsu Jonin are those who either specialize in something, or were field promoted to Jonin. He held up his bowl, and gave a sheepish grin as he asked, "Would you mind making another bowl of ramen please?" "Sure, same thing." After receiving a nod she went back over to the stove, where she began cooking again. "And what you specialize in?" "Actually, I was field promoted due to my actions in the recent Chunin Exams." The woman nodded and said, "I had heard you guys were invaded during the exams." "We were, but there was no serious damage," Naruto said. The two of them spoke for a little longer, with Naruto polishing off 20 more bowls of ramen, much to the blonde woman's shock. They didn't talk about anything specific, just random news and a little about themselves. When Naruto was finished he paid for the food, and was about to leave, when the woman spoke again. "I was wondering." When Naruto turned to her the blonde woman blushed and continued saying, "Since I'm new here, would you mind giving me a tour of Konoha sometime?" Naruto looked at her for a few seconds as he pondered a request. Eventually he said, "Sure, I don't see a problem with that. But..." He held up a finger and wagged it at her. "From now on I want you to just be yourself. That demure act doesn't really suit you." He grinned when he saw the surprised look on the blonde's face. Naruto was just about to leave when he realized something and asked, "You know, I just realized never told me your name." The woman blinked and gained a thoughtful look, seemingly trying to recall if she had given her name or not. "You're right," she said at last, and seemed genuinely surprised. "My name is Samui." "No surname?" "Not that I know of," Samui said with a shrug. "Alright, well I'll see you later Samui-san," Naruto said. "I'll be free tomorrow. If you're interested, I can show you around Konoha then." Samui nodded as Naruto left. The blonde headed for his home, where he would study the sealing books his father had got him before Kyuubi came home. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.